If you admitted to wanting to start a podcast in 2023, you would probably get responses saying that it's oversaturated and you're never going to make it. And just because you can start a podcast doesn't necessarily mean that you should start a podcast. However, if you're asking, should I start a podcast in 2023 or anytime after 2023, the numbers might shock you because in my research, they actually blew me away. I gotta be honest, these headphones are just part of the bit, so I'm gonna take them off because I'm not using them. I just know that you do use headphones in podcasting. The motivation for this video is the fact that I got this beautiful podcast mic yesterday as a gift. So I said, let me look into what it takes to make a podcast. Let's get into the numbers because making a podcast might just be your next best decision. There's over 5 million podcasts out there. However, only 720 have over 10 episodes, meaning that if you produce and post 10 episodes, you're in the top 1.5% of podcasts. Not only that, but 44% of podcasts have less than 3 episodes. So with those numbers, seemingly the hardest part of making a podcast is just simply making a podcast. Some other random facts is that podcasts outweigh audiobooks on Audible by 6 times, and all podcasts have an average of a 60% listen through rate, which is absolutely crazy. To get a click-through rate on YouTube, a good one is like 20 to 50%, and if you get past like a 3-minute view duration, you are absolutely killing it. With those statistics and those numbers compared to YouTube, it seems like a no-brainer at first glance to start a podcast. The crazy numbers do not stop there. Between 2020 and 2022, the creatorship of new podcasts dropped by 80%, whereas the listenership increased by 82 million average listeners. Less people were making podcasts, and the viewership and the listenership of podcasts increased a significant amount. That is crazy. But let's go deeper. The numbers are not lying, and it is looking like starting a podcast is a decently good idea. So in turn, what makes a successful podcast? For starters, it'd be getting over 10 episodes posted. That would put you in the top 1.5%. That would automatically make you successful. But if we're talking in terms of monetary success with podcasting, an article I read said that if you get over 5,000 downloads per episode, you can almost guarantee that you're going to make money and be able to get monetized with sponsorships and brand deals. And they said with an average of 10,000 episode downloads, you can expect to make $500 to $900 per episode. Should you start a podcast? Just because all of the numbers are seemingly really positive, you cannot deny the fact that 75% of all podcasts created fail. These are not statistics as why podcasts fail, but with my experience in YouTube, I would be willing to put money on the fact that people drastically underestimate the amount of time, effort, and energy it's going to take to start a podcast and get it all the way to production and posting and promoting and making sure that people are actually watching/listening to your podcast. I know that that was a huge problem for me starting YouTube, and I can imagine it's the same thing. Alex Cooper from the Call Her Daddy podcast said that she takes an average of 7 to 8 hours just to edit one episode, and that's not including prepping the questions, figuring out who's going to be on the podcast. And granted, she has a team now, but that's something that you would have to consider when you first start a podcast. The editing, the software, the promotion, making sure that you actually get people to listen, because the last thing you want to do is put all this effort and energy into creating a podcast and then having nobody listen to it. Trust me, from personal experience on YouTube, that is a feeling stabbed to the heart when you put your effort, energy, and love into something and no one watches. It is the worst. So starting off from a positive foundation will lead to success. The cost of starting a podcast obviously will differ. You'll need a microphone, you'll need editing software, you'll need a computer, unless you plan to outsource all of the editing and everything like that. But to record a podcast, you are probably going to need a mic. This particular one is not super expensive, but really, really professional high-end mics can get up into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is just a USB mic, so you can easily plug it into your computer, as you can see right here. But once you get into the higher, more expensive ones, you're gonna need a microphone mixing machine that then plugs into the computer, and it can only get more technical from there. Starting a podcast, you can do it for as little as a few $100s, but if you're gonna go all out, it could be into the thousands with studios and soundboarding and all of those things. Do you need it? I don't know. That would be something for you to decide with your budget. My suggestions for if you're gonna start a podcast that is successful, I would start by understanding that it is gonna take you significantly more time than you think. However much time you think it's gonna take you, double it or triple it, and then go from there. If it takes you less than that triple amount of number, then that's fantastic. Honestly, think of it as a part-time job with the amount of effort and energy and time that you're gonna have to put into it. That alone will lead you to higher success. I absolutely guarantee it. Other crazy facts about podcasts is that 60% of them are in English. So if you're bilingual and you want to start a podcast, I would highly suggest / look into potentially doing it in the second language that you speak, because there's simply just not enough podcasts out there in different languages. Spanish is the second most common language, and then Portuguese. The fourth one randomly was Indonesian, followed by German. So if you speak any other language, highly consider looking into potentially starting a podcast in a foreign language. If you speak a second language, podcast it up. The other thing to know if you're considering starting a podcast is just because you make it and put it on the podcast platforms does not necessarily mean you're gonna get listeners. You have to have the promotion outside of it. Consider if you were starting a clothing brand and you just wanted to make t-shirts and you never promoted it anywhere. That's where you have to consider your podcast, which leads me to my next tip. Do not expect your friends and family to support you. And I know that sounds absolutely horrible, but you will probably get more support from strangers than you will from your closest friends and family. That's just the way it is. I don't make the rules. Well, that's the end of if you should start a podcast. I guess it's completely up to you. Like I said, the numbers don't lie. I was incredibly surprised that the barrier to entry was far less than I expected it to. Me thinking that I can make YouTube happen, it seems like making a podcast would be significantly easier in the space with the numbers than making a YouTube channel. But that's up for you to decide. Let me know in the comments if this helped and if you think that you're gonna start a podcast. Also, leave in the comments if you listen to podcasts, how often, and what is your favorite podcast. Honestly, I love the thought of podcasting, but the hardest thing for me is finding good podcasts that I'm actually interested in. So, and if you're gonna start a podcast, put your name down below because I wanna check you out. So, peace. Podcast out.